here today? Show of hands. Bus? Train? As policy director for Lyft, I took a Lyft. Any Lyfters? How about Uber? It's okay, you can say it, I can handle it. We can't talk about the future of transportation unless we talk about where we've come. Transportation has evolved over the years, from the horse and buggy, to the steam engine, to cars, and now to autonomous vehicles. The world is changing, and so is the way we get around. But let's not forget how some of the major roadways and transportation were used when they were originally built. Roadways that were meant to connect people actually wound up creating tension between ethnicities, cultures, and races. We all know the phrase, the wrong side of the tracks, right? It had very little to do with access to the trains, but everything to do with the poor versus the wealthy, the white community versus communities of color, and the good versus the bad. Think about 9094, the main arterial expressway here in the city of Chicago, AKA the Dan Ryan. Its arguable social impact and purpose was to separate the Black community from the white community. A major highway down the middle of Chicago, separating economic opportunity from one community while allowing thriving access to another. The Robert Moses Parkway in New York has a similar story of segregation. It has been said that Robert Moses ordered the engineers to build the bridges extra low to prevent poor people using buses from using the highway. Luckily, things are changing. Now, don't get me wrong, it is very far from perfect, but a mode of transportation that we're using today linked with technology is allowing people to not be limited to only what their neighborhood has to offer. Now it's easier to get from point A to point B. We just grab our phone, tap a button, and in a few minutes, we're on our way. So that's easy for us. But for folks like my parents, and probably many of yours, it wasn't so much easier to do. My father and my mother came here in the 1960s to pursue a better opportunity, the American dream. My father grew up in a rural village in southern India with limited transportation options and no running water until the 1990s. They came here because they had better access to transportation that their families did not. For example, in order to get to my father's village, you had to go in a boat in a canal where the buffalo bathed. Decades later, when one road was built, and mind you, that same road had to be built over and over every year because of the monsoons, only limited vehicles could transport individuals and goods because of its rocky terrain. So they chose to come to Chicago because of how centrally located it was and how accessible it was to world-class opportunities. Top-notch education, exposure to different backgrounds, and connected by major roadways that allowed them to experience everything Chicago and the suburbs had to offer. I was more fortunate than them growing up because of their immigration here. I was surrounded by classmates and friends from different backgrounds, heritages, and perspectives. Those factors are not lost on me. It prepared me for college, my career, and eventually becoming a parent. I too well know that individuals of communities, especially those of color, never have had access to many of these options. Ride-sharing and the future of transportation are eliminating the barriers for people of underserved communities. This technology and new technology of the future are having a systemic change in segregation. It is linking and bridging communities that have historically been denied access to or don't have the means to get around because of where they live or the color of their skin. It is why I'm invigorated as policy director to finally be a solution to a problem that has been baked into the fabric of our country since its inception. Yep, that's me in front of the Canadian City Council in Winnipeg. My primary responsibility is to educate electeds and staff about the benefits that we bring. It is amazing to see what is so obvious to the industry is completely foreign to governing bodies. And it's not so much so that they don't want us to operate there. They just have a hard time figuring out what benefit we bring. For example, electeds who have been around for a long time cannot understand how you would get into a personal car of a stranger and be transported from one place to another, flipping the phrase stranger danger on its head. Sure, if that's what you think the industry does, then you're going to have a hard time understanding the benefits it brings. But once I explain the tools, processes, benefits, utility, the ability to generate revenue, the conversation starts to shift from why do we need this to what more can you do for our neighborhood. When I was in New Orleans post-Katrina doing legal aid, I was shocked to see how disjointed the city was and how limited the infrastructure was to access different parts of the city. Areas like New Orleans East, which had FEMA trailers well after 2005, were completely isolated. It was one of the main arguments I used with the council people when advocating for ride-sharing to be brought to the city. We didn't have to wait for the government to respond, and we didn't have to build an entirely new infrastructure. Here was a technology that got the same outcome in a quicker and much more radical way. So it wasn't just about getting from Bourbon to Frenchman. It was now a person who had a job, the person who could provide for themselves and the livelihood of their families, and an economic stimulus of an additional $17 million in local spending in a city to this day that is still recovering from a natural disaster. This is where it is exciting, and this is why we should all be inspired about the possibilities of the future of transportation as a whole. Technology linked with transportation means so much to so many people. It means hope, choice, opportunity. It means the freedom to be your own boss, an opportunity to make choices, a hope to give back to your community. Name one job where you can pick your own hours, choose your own workplace, and change it on a weekly basis. But it's more than that. It's about connecting people to their friends, their family, their relatives, their favorite restaurant, maybe to a place in the city they've never been to. People need to get places, and we get them there. We get them to show up. So whether it's the long journey that my parents took to pursue their American dream, or a shorter one to register to vote or to go to a job interview, a mode of transportation got them there that is changing lives. For example, ride-sharing operates in all 50 wards of the city of Chicago. A quarter of them begin or end in traditionally underserved areas of transportation. That is impact on the systemic segregation in a meaningful, tangible way. But let's dig deeper. 40% of passengers spend more money at local businesses, and 70% of passengers go out and stay out because of ride-sharing. Think about those local businesses and restaurants who have never seen foot traffic like this before. Transportation will continue to evolve. We're seeing it now with autonomous vehicles, which will even further bridge the digital divide. But then what? More green space. How? If we have technology that requires us to have fewer cars, there'll be fewer cars on the road. And if there are fewer cars, maybe we won't need as many parking lots. So how do we repurpose those parking lots? Maybe it's a new school, a new library, a new gym, a new park, you name it. We're connecting communities, even disenfranchised one. So this new wave of transportation revolution as we know it is more than just getting someone from point A to point B. It's transforming lives. That's right, transforming us as individuals and communities. Look around us. There are people from every background, heritage, with stories that they hold dear. But the concept of showing up and getting from point A to point B, we're actually transforming the way we work, think, and live. That is a compelling notion to understand that a mere convenience that we take for granted is impacting people inside this room and outside of it. So know that when you go to leave today and you grab your phone and you tap that button, know that you're showing up for something new and rare. Know that you're showing up for people you may never meet in your life. And know that you are change agents of your own. Thank you.